Okay, it's starting now, okay. Recently, the Riverhill High School canceled its 2017 Chinese AP4 in-class teaching, which has a huge impact on the students taking the class and students who plan to take the class in the future. Just for your reference, over 66% of students taking the Chinese AP classes do not have a Chinese culture background. The school system is quickly moving to an online or computerized teaching, even for world language classes. What is your opinion on this?
There are certain subjects, I believe, where you definitely need that one-on-one, and I think language is it. I would find it very difficult to learn a language without being in the room with the teacher and have that dialogue and that discussion, because so much of it is nuances and having an understanding, and for other students to be able to be part of that process. I found it interesting to learn that not all classes are available at all high schools in Howard County. And I think that has been an issue for a while. And when I sat on the Operating Budget Review Committee, one of the questions we asked was, why isn't there some sort of why do we have that disparity? Why are we not offering it? And I think part of it is a question of class size. Do they have enough students or don't they have enough students? However, right now we're seeing an ever-increasing number of our class sizes growing. So what we're doing is, by increasing class sizes, we are excluding students who previously could have had these opportunities that now don't have these opportunities. And every student in Howard County should be able to have the same education and the same opportunities. And we're not doing that right now. And I think we have to figure out a better way of doing that. And increasing our class sizes, in my opinion, is not a step in the correct direction to do this. So I think what we have to do is rethink, especially classes like language and science with labs. There are certain things you should not be moving to an online delivery, and should be doing it within the classroom. And I would also be interested to see what process they go through as far as deciding whether or not they're offering a class or whether or not they're going to offer a class, because there's the challenge we have with the elementary school model. Some of those students are learning, for example, Spanish, so they're getting that instruction, and you go from elementary school to middle school. Some of those students are going to be going to middle schools that don't offer language in the 6th grade. So now we've had these students that we're providing this opportunity to learn a different language, and now we're going to be sending them somewhere where they don't have it, and language has to be practiced. So it's almost as though they thought about it on the elementary school level, but what about on the middle school level? And then we go from the middle school to the high school. So I think we have to, when we're making decisions at the board level, is to take a step back and truly see what not only the short-term impact of these decisions are, but the long-term impact. And that, again, is bringing in the voices of the parents, the students, and the teachers that are experiencing this and going through it.
Okay. Question 9. What is your plan to increase the transparency for our budget plan and the general decision-making process?
The information regarding the budget that not only the Board of Education receives from the school system, but the community receives, is woefully incomplete. When the Board of Education makes decisions as to how they're going to do budgeting, they are not looking at data that will help inform those decisions. For example, they are not comparing the approved budget with how the money was actually spent. The information they get is just actual data, and then the budgeted for the previous year of the decision that they're making their current budget for. You need to look at where the money's going, because the Board of Education throughout the year, as well as at the end of the year, is taking money that they said, for example, was going to special education and then transferring it out at the end of the year. If you look at fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15, combining those years, the school system moved about $2 million out of special education into other funding. Now, parents and educators are saying, specifically in special ed as well as other areas, we don't have what we need in the classroom. We don't have enough teachers. Parents are saying, my children are not able to get the services that they need. So you have to ask the question, if you're able to transfer out all of this money, yet you're not meeting your need, how well are we meeting the needs in other parts of the school system? And that's what we need to do. We need to have this information not only available for the board when they make their decisions, but also for the community. Right now we have a situation where the school system has sent a memo to the schools telling the teachers that they cannot spend all of the money that they use for materials of instruction. So now we have teachers who are having some of this money cut in half and not able to get what they need in the classroom that our students need to learn and they need to teach. I believe that we should be focusing our funds in the classroom and not in central office in things that do not support what is going on in the classroom. At the board meeting last night, the board approved spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for MAP testing and for a Gallup survey, which is a survey that's given to teachers to ask them whether or not they have a friend at school, to see if they're engaged. But how is that helping delivery in the classroom? When I speak to parents, and as a parent, I would rather see funding go to things the teachers need in the classroom and smaller class sizes. Studies tell us smaller class sizes are better, especially with students who need more assistance. Mm-hmm. And we've turned our back on that and we're practically running in the other direction. Mm-hmm. It's doing a disservice to our students. And I think that pulls in the issue about process. The board has policies and they're not following their own policies. The way that we as a community are able to impact the decisions in the process is we look at the policies, we look at the process, and we try to figure out where can I have my voice heard? But if the system isn't even following what they're supposed to be doing, it shuts us out of the process. So it's very important to not only have this transparency and the openness, but we also have to have the board following a process that is also transparent and open. When the Board of Education makes a decision, we as the community should be able to have an understanding of why they make that decision. If I am able to be on the board, I want to have the discussions in front of the community as to why are we doing this or why are we doing that. I want the community to know this is why I made my decision. And right now, for example, when they're approving these contracts and all these other things, yet taking money away from the students and the teachers in the classroom, I believe we should have the superintendent should provide a budget that lets us know how much do all of these things cost. So the board, with community input, can understand what are our priorities. Right now, we can't do it that way because it's like either you approve the budget or you don't approve the budget, and you have all of these areas. We have no idea of knowing what is paying for what, how much it costs, and where it's being directed. So we need to tighten that up.
In your opinion, it sounds like the budget structure has a problem. Not only how we spend the money,
Yes.
it's the way how the budget is structured.
Yes.
And that part is apparently not transparent to the community, to the parents, even to the BOE, the current Board of Education.
And it's been like this for a while. This is not something that is relatively new to Howard County. I will say to the school system, I will say it has gotten exponentially worse over the last few years. I sat on the Operating Budget Review Committee, which was a committee of the Board of Education. Our job was to look at the operating budget and provide input to the Board of Education members. When I got on the committee, I said, well, can I please have the information of the approved budget, and then the actual for the previous 5 years, because I thought it was important to look at trending and say, okay, if you say we need $500,000 for textbooks, but as an example, you're transferring out $400,000 every year to something else, but you're still giving them $500,000 every year, tell us where that needs to go, because any organization, be it a school system or a multi-million-dollar company or even a small business, to be healthy and responsible, you need to know where your money is going so that you can properly plan for the future. And we aren't doing a very good job of that. They did not want to provide that information. When I asked for it, their reply to me was, well, why do you want it? And I said, well, because I want to understand the best way to know where you're going to spend your money is to have an idea of where you spent it and whether or not those were wise decisions. But because we're not having the information in a format to do this, and this is one of the main reasons I'm running, is because I felt that when I found that the Board of Education didn't even have this information, and apparently, I don't know if they asked for it and was told they couldn't have it, which I think would be another problem. We're not making informed decisions. And we're teaching our kids in schools that they should be making informed decisions, but we're not doing it as stewards. We're steward on the Board of Education, you are a steward of the tax dollars and of the students. And you have to meet those responsibilities appropriately, and I don't think we're doing that right now.
So another question I have.
I'm sorry, we have to go through the questions just to be fair, to everybody. We are asking the same set of questions, but we have interactive session afterwards.
Okay. How many schools and teachers have you visited in the past 12 months? How many parents or parent groups have you met in the past 12 months? In your assessment, what are their main concerns?
I have had the opportunity to meet with so many parents and so many different groups. And it's interesting because I spent 3 years as president of the PTA Council of Howard County, where I interacted with the PTA members and presidents from all schools within Howard County. So that gave me a perspective that was very, very unique, because I was able to see things are different. Not every school has the same challenges or the same concerns. And I like to say that individual schools have individual personalities, and we need to be able to have policies that are there are certain things that should be standard from school to school, but there also should be a level of flexibility so that those teachers and administrators can honor the diversity and honor the different personalities of the school. And once I started to run for the board, I kept hearing, and I'm hearing a lot from not only parents and current teachers, I'm hearing a lot from staff who used to be with the school system. And the parents especially, they want their children to have a great education. That's why they're here in Howard County. They want their children to have, especially in the early years, for our school system to develop a very strong foundation, because our children, we're like houses. We need that strong foundation in education so that we can build upon it. And our kids have the ability and the knowledge and that structure to ever increase their learning. But they also have an important piece of that is to develop a love of learning. And parents are telling me they're not seeing that as much anymore, especially the ones in elementary school. They say, my child doesn't want to go to school. And this isn't something that you hear often. I mean, most kids, they want to go to elementary school. It's fun. So they want to see more emphasis on the education of their students, again, in the classroom, because that's what directly impacts our kids, is what is going on in the classroom. They are very frustrated that they feel as though their voices are not being heard. They don't feel they have representation right now on the Board of Education. They don't feel as though the school system is always making decisions with their input or in the best interest of their children. And that's an important part of the Board of Education, is that you're making decisions that impact children's education, their lives, and their future, which is very, very personal to parents. And you need to do so respectfully, because you're not always going to please everybody, but you need to do so in a way that is respectful of everybody. And they want to know why we're making these decisions. And I think in Howard County, we have a very engaged community, very engaged parents, and parents are, in general, very supportive of the system. But I have seen less and less of that, and parents are telling me, I don't have as much trust as I used to. And we need to restore that trust. And I think by doing that, we have to have a way to work collaboratively with our parents, the different groups and organizations, and also with our elected officials at the county and the state level. We don't have that. And parents want to see that again. Teachers want to see that again. They want the accountability. They want the transparency. They want the involvement. They want to know where their money is going. They want to be able to have a say about that. And that's what I hope to change when I get on the board.
Okay. There are many Asian students and Latino students in our school systems. Some schools have a high proportion of Asian students and some have a high proportion of Latino students, and outside of school time, their meals are primarily the foods associated with their culture. However, the current school meals do not offer such options. How do you plan to change this?
Well, the whole school food issue is in part impacted by the federal government. There are guidelines because we take funding from the federal government in order to provide the lunches. And there are some jurisdictions where they've stopped doing that so that they can make the changes that their communities and their parents and their systems want to do with the food that they provide the students. So we would have to, right now, we would have to work within the guidelines of the federal government, as well as there are wellness guidelines that the school system established as well. However, that doesn't mean, I think it's a very good idea to have more variety, especially from the different ethnic groups that we have within our community, because that is shifting and that is growing. And I think it would be important to continue to get student input into that, but I would also like to see in family and consumer science where they teach cooking, maybe they can also integrate different cultural meals and foods into that instruction, because I think that would also be an interesting way to show that there are differences, because it's a very, food is a very American thing, and it's a very, to all cultures, food is very, very important. And I think it's important to honor that. And that got into some of the issues with celebrations at school, and why can't we allow, because we celebrate through food in the United States and other cultures. It's very important to us. But I think we need to, again, the more variety we can have in our lunchrooms, because right now the kids aren't eating the lunches. They don't like it. I think we need, yes, we have to provide, there's a balance between providing a healthy lunch, but also provide, no matter how healthy it is, if they're not eating it, it's not helping them. And right now, I think we continue to have that challenge. So I think, again, it's something that the system has to do a better job of doing. And I always used to say when the school system was looking at the new wellness guidelines and saying, well, it should be this, it should be that, I always felt that it would probably help if the Board of Education and the school system staff had to eat the same lunch that the students were. I think that probably might change things a little bit quicker, because right now they have, there's a cafeteria in the central office that is an outside company. They're not eating the same thing the kids are eating. And I think it would be a very interesting conversation to have with them after they eat this and say, okay, well, do you think maybe we can make a few changes here? But I think the student voice is very, very important in this as well.
Okay. That's all the questions.
Yeah, we can ask a couple of optional. I think the first question is very interesting.
Okay. HCPSS gives out 3 PARCC tests and 2 or 3 MAP tests each year. It consumes many hours of instruction time. What are your views on these standardized tests?
I believe data is very, very important. However, I feel that this depending so much on these tests is taking more away from our students and not benefiting them. And it's through different ways. Number one, these tests, they cost money. So not only does the test cost money, we have to have certain computers with certain updated software to do it. These tests are given online, so we have to have bandwidth. So there's all this other infrastructure that we need that costs money to do these tests. The PARCC tests, especially in the lower grades, our educators are spending so much time prepping them to take the test. And then the hours to actually physically take the test, we have to realistically say, and we have to, again, go to our educators and say, is this hurting or harming your ability to deliver the instruction in the classroom? What do the parents think? How are we, is this really making a difference? Because again, if we have to spend the money on the testing, we're not able to spend the money somewhere else. And I think, and from the studies that I've seen, smaller class sizes, more individualized education, because they like to say, well, these tests are going to allow us to understand the students that are not achieving well, whether or not they're doing a good job. My response to that is, I would think that having smaller class sizes all year long and less test preparation and actual instruction is going to do a much better job of educating these students. It's only one point in time. And the PARCC test is mostly used to judge whether or not the teachers are doing a good job and whether or not the school system is doing a good job. As a parent, I look at how my child's doing on their report card. How are they doing on the tests that they're given, that the teacher's giving for those particular subjects and those particular the areas of instruction. I've been told by teachers that they're very frustrated because the timing of when they're giving the PARCC, they're giving them the test on things that the curriculum hasn't gotten to yet. So it's not even a true test. The MAP test, in theory, is supposed to allow teachers to change their instruction. However, the U.S. Department of Education did a study in 2012 that showed teachers that gave the test versus teachers who didn't give the test, there was no real difference in how they delivered instruction in the classroom. So if you're telling me that you need this test to deliver instruction in the classroom, and the studies are showing that's not happening, again, why are we giving the test? I think we need to turn it around and say, well, how is this benefiting us? Because I don't see it benefiting us. And they're making everyone take the MAP. Why aren't we asking the educators and saying, do you really use this? Is this really helpful? Maybe some do. Maybe there's a way to allow a teacher to decide whether or not they want to give it, or maybe there are certain students they feel need it. But in my experience, I have a child going into his freshman year in high school. Up until this point, and I'm going to say I believe throughout his education in Howard County, that his teachers are going to know whether or not he's understanding what is being taught in the classroom. And that if they have the flexibility that they need to make sure that all of their students are getting the subject matter, and we have ways to provide extra instruction for students who need it, I think that's a better way of spending our dollars, because it's not only the money, it's the time in the classroom that we're taking away from them. And although they will say Howard County compared to other jurisdictions in Maryland give less standardized testing, that's fine, but who's to say that our less is still not too much? And that is how we have to approach things, as to what is best for Howard County students. Because that's who our responsibility is to, not to students in other states, not to students in other parts of Maryland. And I think we need to refocus on us and put our resources there.
Okay. Do you think we should modify the tests or completely take them out altogether?
The challenge we have with the park test was that it was tied to funding that school systems get. However, the funding that the Howard County school system received, it's federal funding, it comes from the federal government, and they basically, it was what's referred to as a carrot and a stick. They said, well, we'll give you more funding if you take the test. Now, other school systems in Maryland depend on much more funding from the federal government than we do. In the FY17 budget, the amount of federal funding and other funding we get that comes to support our school systems is less than 1%. And when we first started doing the park, over 3 years, the amount of money that we were getting from the federal government was $300,000. So I'm not saying $300,000 isn't a lot of money, but to completely change our curriculum and to change the way that we do business in Howard County, we had curriculum that was not only being used in other states but other countries. Our curriculum was that good. So I'm concerned that we stopped doing what obviously was working and we now changed to something that was unproven. And as you see now, more and more states are dropping out of the park and are saying, you know what, this isn't working for us. And I feel that it's making us dumb things down and not deliver the type of education we know that our students need because our hands are tied. And I would like to see us find a way to untie that, because I think it's most important to have local control over your education, where our teachers, our parents, our administrators, our students, where we have the input, because we know best what works for us, not somebody in Washington, D.C.
And regarding the map, I have been asking my daughter's teachers how they're going to use the test, and almost all of them said that we are not instructed, we don't know how to use it. So, I mean, if you spend so much money on tests and all the teachers don't know how to use it, that's such a waste.
It's a huge waste, and they discussed this last night because they were renewing the contract over $300,000 for this. And they were going back and forth about, well, what is the money for? And they're like, well, it's for the test, and then it's for professional development. And then they were like, well, no, it's just for the test. But they were saying that, oh, our teachers have instruction on how to use it. And I have had the same conversations with the teachers you have. They don't. So I don't understand. I don't see the benefit. And that's what I want to see. We've been doing it for a few years, and they, to my satisfaction, and apparently to the boards, because they keep renewing these contracts. And especially in a time when we're not allowed, where we can't have teachers buy what they need in the classroom, yet we're spending this money over here. You have to make hard decisions.
So another thing, do the math. You spend $300,000 on the contract, and then you get $300,000 from the federal. What's the point? The net income is zero, right?
Well, I mean, and it's interesting because to me, I think we need to put the dollars where the dollars are going to do the most money. For example, wouldn't it be nice for high school and middle school to have buses so that students could stay after school to get additional instruction or do sports or do clubs and have that opportunity? We could do that with that money. Because I am very fortunate. My children live walking distance to their high school and their middle school. So if they need to have help after school, they can stay after school and get instruction because they just have to walk home. We need to make that available to other students, and we're not doing that. So I find it frustrating that we say that, well, we need to close the achievement gap, and we need to do this, and we need to do that, but we're not putting money into ways that will directly impact that. And if we don't put money into ways that are directly going to do that, it's naive of us to think that we're going to make a change. And we need to make these changes, but it takes putting the money in the right spot, and I don't believe we're doing that right now.
Another thing is about next year budget. I heard from our principal, Dayton Oaks principal saying they are asked to cut 50% for material and equipment.
Right.
And every school is asked to cut certain personnel expense too. So what she said, there is no longer small class.
No, the class size is ridiculous. In my elementary school, they have 102 kindergartners, I believe 4 classes, and 1 paraeducator for half the day. How do you do that? We're paying, we're taking from one to the other. And when in FY16, a year ago, when they were talking about the budget, there was all of this about how they were reducing the paraeducators and they were taking them out. They were taking staff out of the libraries, which is where the kids would go who didn't have computer access at home or internet access. None of that was restored, but we're paying money to a company to take surveys of our teachers as to whether or not they're happy at school. I mean, I'd like them to be happy, but I don't think paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Gallup organization is the formula to do that.
So I guess my question is, I know the county council did not approve the budget